Alan Forbury, who is head teacher from, he says, a very sunny Banff Academy. But Alan, I'm not sure if that was the truth. Remember, we're talking about ethics.
I'm afraid it wasn't true, no. It's quite chilly, but it's still a beautiful place.
It is indeed. So welcome, Alan. Thanks so much for coming along. We really appreciate it. Also joined by Kat Cushia. Kat's a head teacher. She's joining us all the way from Newport in Wales, where I am reliably informed it is indeed Scorchio.
It is.
Hi, Kat. Did you say
hi, everyone.
Hi there. So great to have Kat. Also joined by Lindsay McRoberts and Annette Alexander, who offered a provocation with regards to their work at Duncanrig Secondary School in East Kilbride. Lindsay has moved jobs now and is Director of Education in South Ayrshire, and Annette is acting head teacher at that school. So hello, Lindsay. If I say hello, will you say hello so you can pop up?
Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to be here.
Great to see you, Lindsay. And thanks very much as well, Annette. Great to have you here.
Yes, hello everyone. I've been in acting post for about 2 months, so I'm very much learning on the job at the moment.
And what you really needed was exposure through the General Teaching Council of Scotland to 150 strangers. So
absolutely, because I don't have an awful lot to do at the moment.
Well, you're very welcome,
and I'm very much looking forward to it.
Great. So here is the format. I'm going to say a little bit about what's going to happen, and then I'm going to introduce the provocateurs to offer a short summary on what they said in their videos and their ideas. So we've watched the videos. We will get a short summary now from everybody, and then we will break into some random breakout rooms where you will be joined by a facilitator to help you, and a Padlet will be shared to guide your conversation. We're asking you to reflect on what you've heard from our colleagues who have joined us and who have given of themselves in preparing the video input for us. And then we will all come back together and we will have a panel discussion, and we will put some questions to the panel and ask their deepest, darkest thoughts about all sorts of matters that they have raised around about ethics in education. Now, please start posting any questions that you might have for the panel at any point through this on the Padlet. There's a little bit on it. You will see that you can add your name so that we can know who you are and ask any questions. So start doing that now. And I'm going to go to you first, Rowena. Is it okay if I come to you first, Rowena, to do a short summary of what you spoke about in your video, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Pauline. So hi, everyone. And in a nutshell, I offer 3 areas as part of the provocation. The first is simply being a good person, or with the best intentions is not enough. We need to know who we are. So I called it positionality, our own history, and how this shapes our thinking of issues of advantage, disadvantage, power. We know that who we are not only shapes our views, but obviously our understanding of issues and ultimately how we interpret the everyday. And of course, I guess it impacts on our practice. This might all seem quite obvious, but I do think we need to be reminded of the importance of doing this. I also came across, in preparing for it, a quote from Lisa Delpit, which an educator in the US, that I thought was really important. And Kathy Heighton was citing her. Kathy Heighton's a professor of educational leadership in University of North Carolina, where she suggests that ongoing self-reflection is part of good character, hence the ethical teacher. But Lisa Delpit said that we had to engage in a special kind of listening if we're going to be ethical teachers, and are having a preparedness to expose our vulnerabilities sufficiently enough, she said, to allow our worlds to turn upside down in order to allow the realities of others to edge themselves into our consciousness. I absolutely love that quote, because I think that is the hub of us unpacking our positionality. So that's the first. The second is something that I knew that was going to be provocative, which is we need teachers to be political. And I don't mean here party political, but to actually to become savvy and not naive. So not to have an unproblematic understanding of issues like power, equality and social justice. Ultimately, for me, doing social justice work is political work. It involves a lot of constant questioning: who has the power, who does not, whose work is being represented, whose is not, who gets to paint the picture, who counts, who does not. It also means actually being grown up about our approach and not to have an aversion to the concepts that we might find difficult or maybe jars on us, like anti-racism or class oppression. And so I think that if we don't understand the macro, which is really what the being political is about, rather than about indoctrination, then I think it's difficult for us to completely meet the needs of the micro. Finally, culturally responsive pedagogy requires homework on our part, and culturally responsive pedagogy places us, the teacher, as a learner alongside our pupils. Every one of us brings something to the table, and I suppose the challenge is to find out at an individual level what our pupils are bringing to the table. I did find in doing the video Shapiro-Lischinski's twin concepts of morality of justice and morality of care to be quite useful. I think the morality of justice is about understanding the macro and relates to the two previous provocations on being much more savvy about life in general and politics, but also about our positionality. The morality of care part of it relates to the culturally responsive pedagogy, because ultimately it is about relationships and how those relationships shape our aspects of our practice within our local context. So that's it in a nutshell, Pauline.
Sounds great, Rowena. I love a special kind of listening. That's nice, isn't it? Yeah, I can already hear the kind of questions that might come from your thoughts about being political. So that is great. Thanks, Rowena. Alan, would you like to give a short resume of your offering, please?
Yeah, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. So mine's really quite simple. It's about the changing role of the secondary school teacher, particularly in my own school. Just a wee bit of background to that. In that 3 years ago, I became increasingly aware of the levels of anxiety, the lack of resilience and confidence in youngsters, particularly in secondary school age, the levels of depression, eating disorders, and a whole wide range of health issues that they were experiencing. And this was pre-pandemic. And we really felt that that was something that the secondary school should be tackling. But the knock-on effect of all of those conditions is almost a creepingly obsession with digital technology with young people. The amount of time that they spend online is increasing almost on a daily basis, but the number on average of hours that youngsters spend attached to a mobile device is something between 7-12 hours every day, and that then manifests itself in further ill health. Now, in order to prise them away from these devices and from social media, I think the responsibility of the school is to change its approach, in that schools traditionally have been driven by what they can be measured by. And I know that somebody else in this call has already said something like that in her provocation, but I certainly would agree with that if you design a school based on purely examination success and the journey to higher education, then the numbers of youngsters who continue to spend all that length of time on their phones and suffer ill health will continue. So in order to change what happens in a secondary school, we have to change the focus away from subject-driven, knowledge-driven teachers to teachers that teach young people about mental health and well-being and how to become resilient, confident, and actually build the 4 capacities which Curriculum for Excellence designed sort of 20 years ago. So I then set about trying to make some changes to the structure of our school. And we did that by doing away with registration and introducing something called Squad. So rather than having 10 minutes every day where teachers basically register pupils, they now have half an hour with a squad leader. So the 2.5 hours a week in a small family group where they can talk about issues, talk about what is worrying them, talking about all sorts of things that bother them. So we have that, which is squad, which is teachers taking really the first line guidance role, which would have normally been done by 5 teachers in the school. So we now have 65 of them that do that. In addition to that, we changed around the school day. We moved away from a 32-50 period week to 3 100-minute sessions, which has been a bit of a roller coaster, although the last time I looked, roller coasters were quite fun. And to finish off, I'll just say that in those 100-minute sessions, we also introduced a new kind of pedagogy, which is called project-based learning. So youngsters are immersed in their learning over long extended periods of projects, which have a product of their learning at the end of it, rather than just an assessment. And during all of that, and within all of that, squad and 100-minute sessions and PBL, we develop skills. And the ability of youngsters to be able to articulate those skills through an Odyssey programme is really, really important. So pupils build their own confidence, they find school engaging, they find it meaningful, they find it rewarding. And as a result of all of that, we can reduce the levels of mental health, depression and anxiety, because school is a fun place to be and it's not just about tests and exam scores. That was my provocation.
Thanks, Helen. And I think it'll be interesting to talk through with everybody later on about what courage sometimes is needed in Scottish education to make a change like you've just described, and what might get in the way or support that. So thanks so much, Helen. That's really great. Lindsay, can I ask you to introduce a little bit about what you and Annette brought to your provocation, please?
Thank you, Pauline. Thank you. Over the past 3 years within Duncan Big, we've really been reflecting on our curriculum and who our curriculum is for. And initially started this work pre-COVID, and it's probably become even more important as we come through the pandemic. It was easy for us, I think, to say, you know, we have a broad curriculum that meets the needs of all young people, but how confident were we in actually following that through for every learner that came into our school, regardless of background, ethnicity, special needs, etc. Some of the early work we did around about the area was involved us looking at some learner journeys, the experience of young people as they made progress, particularly through the senior phase. And as a head teacher, very passionate about inclusion in particular, believed probably we were doing some quite good stuff. However, reflecting on some of the progress of young people right through our school, realised that a lot of that was add-ons. It was delivered by pupil support staff. It wasn't really part of an inclusive curriculum that met the needs of young people in every classroom right across our school. So we started by considering the big picture. I also took part at that time in a curriculum masterclass through Stirling University, through the Excellence in Headship programme, which was really about getting back to basics around about curriculum, looking at the intention of Curriculum for Excellence and asking ourselves as a school, if we measure the success of our curriculum not just by attainment, but against the 4 capacities, what would we do different as school leaders? What risks, and as Pauline just said, what courage do we need to do something different if it wasn't always about attainment? If you took the attributes and capabilities of the 4 capacities and looked across these at how successful would our school be in ensuring young people can think creatively and independently, apply critical thinking to new contexts, and we began to look at developing curriculum rationale. And you can't develop a curriculum rationale without engaging with the big ideas of Curriculum for Excellence, asking ourselves about who our curriculum was for, what makes us unique as a school, what is it about our school environment, the locality we are in that drives the curriculum that we offer young people. So we took a long, hard look at what we offered, the outcomes and experiences of young people, and something we've done very recently is to really get back to strong and robust self-evaluation. How are we evaluating the skills that Alan just talked about there that young people are developing? Does the attainment analysis tell us about how well all young people are achieving? How well are young people with additional support needs, for example, or from different ethnic backgrounds doing in the schools? What skills do we need to develop, and how and who decides that? From that strong self-evaluation basis, we're able to stimulate debate and discussion with staff, really taking staff back to an evidence base, engaging them in ideas, engaging them in the big thinking really around about Curriculum for Excellence, to begin to challenge their thinking around about what they offered within the curriculum. And it's allowed us to get to a point now, even more so I think, coming through the pandemic, where for all schools and for lots of head teachers across the country saying, there's a bit of it feels slightly more empowered as a head teacher coming through COVID, because it's really been about what's important within your school and within your context in your school, and how do we build on that empowerment to begin to start moving our curriculum forward. And Annette, as part of the provocation, you'll see has shared the actual sort of detail of how we're beginning to do that as a school. So thanks, Pauline.
Thanks, Lindsay. And as you were speaking, Lindsay, I was reminded of, I hope I get the reference right, I think it was Hargreaves that talked about being bold, but being specific, you know, not just having the big idea, but actually the depth of what is this going to be in reality. So that's really interesting. And I'm not going to ask you to speak right now, if that's okay, because I'm going to move on to Kat. And if Kat, if you could give us a little resume, and then we will make our way to breakout rooms. On you come, Kat.
Thank you. Prynhawn da, everyone. Good afternoon from very sunny Wales. It's absolute pleasure to be with you all. A quick overview of my provocation. Well, I suppose it comes from a place of leadership for learning, and that's something that I'm extremely passionate about. I had the privilege of opening Jubilee Park as a brand new school in September 2017 on a growing housing estate. So brand new school on a brand new housing estate on the west side of Newport, quite an affluent area of Newport. We've had a rapid growth in terms of our pupils and our staff. We opened with just over 100 pupils, now we're full at 375, and from 16 staff to 52. So in 5 years, it's been a huge growth. And I suppose what I've been very focused on right from the start is developing a school based upon our vision principles, but also based upon developing process. These end goals are these shiny projects that actually don't mean anything, and having this ongoing focus on learning. In Wales, very exciting in education at the moment. We've got a lot of new national policies, and I've really taken hold of these policies and tried to enact them within our school. Some of those being things like schools as learning organisations, our professional standards, and our curriculum for Wales. Through all the work that we've done as a school, we've been very focused on developing our culture for learning, making sure that first and foremost we build those relationships for learning. And for me, that starts with highly trained staff. So I suppose professional learning and development, and that notion of developing our staff so that all staff can thrive has been at the backbone of our school. I'm also an education doctorate student, and I'm researching the impact of collaborative professionalism on teacher wellbeing at the moment within my school, and I've had some really interesting findings, and I firmly believe if you get the culture right, then staff wellbeing definitely follows. We've done a lot of work in terms of curriculum and things like that, but what has underpinned everything for me has been about relationships and making sure we have a firm focus on our ethical beliefs, our reasoning, and making sure we build that trust and purpose within our school.
Thanks, Kat. Interesting work as well in terms of core purpose and how you bring everybody on that journey. And I can see lots of questions coming in already for everybody, which is great. So we're going to get on with the next part now. So in a moment, you will be whisked off to a breakout room. We've got lots of questions, and I know we won't be able to do them all justice. So I'm going to start with you, Rowena, because not unexpectedly, I'm just checking Rowena is here. She managed to get back in okay?
Yes, I'm here, Polly.
Rowena, I want to ask you about what you said about sharing political views. We've got a question about from someone saying, I've always been taught that I must not share my personal views on politics and religion. I wondered how you suggest I should do that with my primary P5 and P6 children. I have always tried to engage the children with these issues without letting them know what I think. So what would you like to say about that, Rowena?
Okay, so I think there are two bits. The first is, I think when I talked about that provocation about being political, it was about developing our political understanding of issues. So, and the classic one that I've seen, for example, in my work on race is the teacher who's absolutely brilliant with the Black or minority ethnic child sitting in front of them, really having that morality of care, but equally holding incredibly racially prejudiced views about immigration based on just not understanding how the impact of the media impacts on the immigration narrative. So that's a classic example about just not having that savviness. The second point about sharing political views with children, it's not about sharing our political views with children out of context. There's always room, I think, for a teacher to indicate their beliefs from time to time, but to declare as one of perspectives amongst others and to invite other perspectives to be shared. I do not think we do this each time we teach, but there will be opportunities that does prompt us to actually have to say something. Perhaps you're asked by your pupils directly, what do you think And we need to be able to show that as adults, we have different views. And that includes us as teachers. We're adults and we have to model how we react and respond to difficult questions and topics. So if you're teaching about religion, you yourself maybe are an atheist, but you might say something like, personally, I do not follow any religion, but that is a personal choice, but others do. And you present that. The key for me is that we're not placing more value on our own views than on others. So I hope that in a nutshell answers that.
Thanks, Rena. That was very efficient in your answering. Excellent. Thank you, much appreciated. Alan, I'm going to come to you because I'm going to pull a whole load of questions together for you into this. There are lots of people asking questions about the experiences you've put together for your senior pupils in the afternoon. And there are also some questions about what their views are about that, and is there a need for you to have considered that you're not actually reinforcing anything that's been brought about by the pandemic by doing what you have done? Would you like to tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so it's interesting you say that the plans that I've put in place for the afternoons, that's the crucial thing about the afternoons, is that the pupils are taking responsibility themselves for what they, in inverted commas, get up to after lunchtime. Now they can take part in peer support learning, so they take leadership of learning through into the junior school, which consolidates their own learning, which works really well. And I've seen and witnessed senior pupils reacting very positively to that they feel a lot more confident in sharing their own knowledge and expertise and skills with younger children, and I see that as a real positive. In addition to that, work placement and work experience is something that they also report as being positive, because it gives them a chance to dabble or experience different workplace environments or different career paths, that they can then make a decision that that's not what they're going to do, or that is what they're going to do. So they're using those afternoons in a very clever way to gain experience, not just in terms of the generic skills of working, but also in terms of different career pathways. So that's been really positive, I think, as well. My own context with my own school is that there's been a 75% increase in families accessing universal credit. So some parents are really happy that those young people can go and earn money in the afternoon and bring home some cash to the family, and they can still keep on top of their studies. So that's not to be missed in terms of the situation that we're in. But some of our more academic students also report it positively, because they can spend those afternoons in the faculties that they want to spend time in to get the additional support that they require. Now, one of the negatives there is that, I don't have an unlimited number of subject specialists available every single afternoon for them to be able to individually support pupils one-to-one in that context. So sometimes that's a little bit challenging, but nevertheless, there will be a teacher available on hand to signpost them to learning. So that's maybe not running as perfectly as I would like it to do. So in terms of the COVID isolation point, don't forget that the phrase that I've got in my school is, if we get squad right, we get everything else right. So these senior pupils, remember, they meet their squad leader first thing in the morning. So their squad leader is actually challenging them and supporting them as to what did you do yesterday afternoon? What are you planning to do this afternoon? And they don't necessarily keep a record of it. But, when I ask a squad leader, what was Pauline doing yesterday afternoon, I would expect him or her to be able to tell me what Pauline was doing. So it's very much taking on board a sense of responsibility and maturity amongst the senior pupils, which I felt was a massive risk. I have to admit, I was really worried that they would abuse that time, but they recognise that is something that I have given them, and they are embracing it. And I'm really shocked by that result, but very pleased by it. So I think overall it is a positive. Some of the negatives are that there are one or two that do just slope away, but they would have done that anyway. So I'm going to continue with it. I said to my new fifth years when they were in fourth year, how do you feel about the fact that we could possibly return back to timetable classes in the afternoon? And it was just, almost petition time, in terms of they were really looking forward to being seen as senior students with that respect and responsibility of managing their own time.
Thanks, Alan. And for the record, I would never slope away during the afternoon if that's what you thought might happen there. So Rowena talked a little bit about individual teacher and positionality in that space. You're talking there, Alan, about young people. Lindsay, can I ask you about staff? There are some questions around about how you go about in this space of courageous change. How do you generate a collegial culture? How do you get staff working with you all in the same direction? Lindsay, is that something you could help us with?
Yeah, thanks, Pauline. I think one of the things we talked about just when you were on breakout rooms was about that, developing that courage and boldness, and having come through COVID. I think as a head teacher, I felt a lot more empowered, and we have to encourage our staff to feel the same. There's no point in us being big and bold if we're still holding our staff to the same accountability measures that we expected 3-4 years ago. So that really working with staff around about, it's okay to make a mistake, it's okay to try something different. But one of the key things we did was about taking staff right back to the basics in terms of really strong self-evaluation about our school, but linking it to young people's stories. So Annette and Alexander and the deputies took them through, learner journeys of children that they knew that had achieved reasonably well in 4th year through S5 and S6, and the kind of realisation for many of our staff that they had no involvement in those children's lives after they left 4th year. They hadn't stayed within their curricular area, but also they had achieved very little within the 2 years of secondary school, and where could they have been and what the pathway might have looked like. And when we related it to really strong self-evaluation around about the school or context beyond just attainment data, it's not about standing up at the beginning of August and saying X number of children gets X number of hires. It was looking at individual stories, and that really began to stimulate thinking and discussion around about what we do differently. Encouraging staff to get out as much as possible. As a head teacher, I was part of the Bosch group, and we used to really encourage teachers in services to go out to see other schools, to see practice elsewhere. I came from Duncan was a very, very large school, and with that came a sense sometimes of we don't need to go anywhere else because we're so big, all the answers are in here. But there's nothing more powerful than sending teachers out to other schools to look at practice, to be involved in research and reading, providing the time for that within in-service days. So trying to shift your professional learning time for staff into their own professional learning time, not standing at the front delivering presentations and PowerPoints. And some of the stuff I think COVID has helped us with is to move away from that kind of model of professional learning and looking at different approaches to that as well, and allowing teachers to be able to see practice within their own school and shaping the way self-evaluation even works within your school, to encourage staff to share a lot more and to be part of each other, and to stimulate discussion, ensuring teachers are coming to things like this, that they know what's happening outside of their own classrooms, their own departments, their own schools, and they're able to challenge each other. We talked about earlier on about Scottish education is very consensus driven, and sometimes those voices appear very critical rather than just actually critically informed, and we need to get teachers to think more right in that way. So one of the small things we did was everybody who was in a master's in our school, which we have a lot of young staff in particular who come out of the PGD and continue at masters, allowing them to come together to really present information to the rest of the teaching staff, to share their ideas, to share their research, to be involved at that level as well. Thanks, Pauline.
Thanks, Lindsay. I think there's something really in that space for us to talk about as a profession, about how we generate that shared voice that can honour differences of opinion and disagreements and build something stronger together as a result. I think, Lindsay, thank you for that. And Kat, I might come to you now because we've got a few questions that are asking about another stakeholder group, if you like, our partners, parents. And the question specifically, Kat, is that in your video provocation, you spoke about the removal of the feedback excellent and good and labels such as that. You use more, where are we now, where are we going? But do you get pressure from parents to know exactly where their child is in comparison to others? Is that not an issue? What happens when children move to secondary school? Is there sort of continuity of approach? Could you say a bit more about that for us, please, Kat?
Yeah, no problem. And I suppose that goes right back to our culture that we've established from the start of opening as a school. And I think that one of the things that we said when parents first joined us in our first cohort in 2017, and what we regularly say is our school is different to other schools in that respect. We don't have labels, we don't have schemes of work, we do everything from scratch in terms of looking at what our children need and using that as a point to move forward. So when we're talking about removal of labels, we do that for both our staff in terms terms of lesson observations. We don't do formal lesson observations and formally grade our staff as such, and neither do we do that for the children. Parents, I've not had one parent saying, but I'd like a grade for my child, and I think the reason for that is that they're involved. We talk a lot about growing together with our community, and our parents have been involved in every step of the way. We inform our parents, we have very good communication in terms of them knowing where their children are in their learning. We build a narrative around every child. 4 times a year we have what we call our pupil progress meetings, where myself and my deputy will meet with every individual teacher. So we have 14 teachers in the school, and we will meet with them and talk about every single child in depth. We're able then to articulate that back to the parents, so parents have a clear understanding and this narrative of where their children are in their learning and where they need to go next. The children have that understanding, and we start in nursery in terms of building that learning capacity within our children so that they're able to identify themselves as learners. And obviously if you start young, by the time they're in year 5 and 6, so for us that's 9, 10, 11-year-olds, they're able to articulate themselves as learners where they are in their learning journey. And then linking that to, you know, moving to secondary school. So for us, they move from year 6 to year 7 into secondary school. We do a lot of work with our secondary school. We're developing a 3 to 16 continuum of learning across all of our cluster. So we have 7 primary schools and 1 secondary school within our cluster of schools. And we spend a lot of time in discussing, well, what does progress look like? What does assessment look like? We don't have levels, we don't have outcomes. You know, we're talking about building that narrative of progress. And our secondary school are very, very supportive in that respect. So those pupil progress meetings I just talked about, we mimic those in terms of our year 6 teachers. So the top of primary school meet with the year 7s in secondary and have those same conversations about every single child in terms of what makes them a good learner, what things are potentially barriers to their learning. And that's been a massive change for us in terms of culture for the secondary school and for the schools. It's not a change for our culture because that's how we've grown and developed from the start, but it is a change in individual cultures, because although I'm a new school, I've got staff that have worked, you know, like myself in my 20th year of being an educator. So you've got staff that still have, you know, those sort of historic ways of working and those historic points of thinking. And it is hard sometimes. And we talk a lot about slipping back into that old brain thinking, and it takes a lot to come around. And for me, that goes right back full circle to the essence of my provocation, and it being about investing in staff and professional learning, and echoing a lot of what Lindsay was just saying.
Thanks, Kat. And a few comments in the chat for you about how you live and breathe the professional standards and everything that you do, and that's just so powerful. Now, I know that we're coming up towards the end of our time, so I'm going to tell you my plan. I have a question for Annette. I would like to go back to Rowena for a question. If you can hold on and be with us for that, fabulous. If not, we understand, because let's face it, it's nearly tea time. I'm going to come to you first, Annette, because there's a specific question around about the work that you and Lindsay spoke about with regards to your approach to school council, pupil ambassadors in curriculum areas, and a specific question about what, if any, resistance was there from departments and faculties? And I suppose it's not in the question, but what did you do to address some of that, if there was any? Is that okay with you, Annette?
Yeah, of course, absolutely. So in our context, as Lindsay's already mentioned, Duncanrig is a very large secondary school. So we actually set up a staff school improvement group, and we had departments, all departments represented from across the school, volunteer members meeting out with the school day. So that was one of the first things about sort of breaking barriers to resistance, and each department and faculty was in a different place. We wanted to move away from this tokenistic pupil voice of a large council where voices weren't heard, and really start to engage young people in school improvement. So we have some models of excellent practice. Our computing department have ambassadors from S1 to S6 who meet regularly, come with ideas, run whole school events. And we have some departments that had no kind of pupil leadership within their curriculum that they recognised. So we really got our young people along to present to staff. That was one of the most powerful things to do, and explain the benefits to them, not only in their self-confidence, the skills they had learned, and then reflecting back on when we had looked at our contextualised data. Data told us one thing, but when it started looking at the learner journeys, we really got in about what were we doing for our young people, and back to that, who's our curriculum for, and ensuring that we're helping young people develop across the 4 capacities. We also looked at the benefits, ensuring that if departments are truly looking at self-evaluation, then where is pupil voice in that? and how are they engaging learners and what is their experiences like in the school and across each subject area. And for the young people, since we've started this, and we are in different places and we recognise that, so the pace of change is another factor. We're not looking for everyone to be at a set point. There are some departments and faculties much further ahead. Some only have S5 and S6 leaders, and again, we're trying to break down barriers, ensuring that voices are heard across the school. But it's very much a case of recognising that this is not something we need to do tomorrow. This is something we truly want to embed within our curriculum, so we can have young people's voices, but it's also fair to recognise that pupil voice, unless we inform pupils and work with pupils, sometimes their voice can't necessarily help us because they don't know enough about what goes on in schools and policy and all the stuff behind it. So our plan is having our staff groups and our pupil groups work together. Rather than being separate, they mirror each other. So the same issues are discussed with young people and staff, and therefore the sort of context is given across as well. It is early days. We have one of our PEF principal teachers who has participation and engagement. And again, looking outwards as well, what are other people doing, so we can sort of build on this and ensuring that our young people feel supported and that they have a say in their education and personalisation and choice, and in shaping how our school goes forward.
Thanks, Annette. And another theme for another day is how we can get out of the short-term thinking about next year's improvement and think about that long-term, actually, what is our legacy impact that we want to make as a group of humans in this space. So thanks for that, really exciting. Now, Rowena, I'm coming back round. This is a question I have to read out loud from the paper because I don't want to get it wrong. So Rowena, there's a question about, in relation to culturally responsive teaching and the role of teachers in meeting the needs of diverse school communities, in what ways can teachers best develop practices which address the specific racial and cultural context of their schools? And in what ways could the system support this? So taking it into, what does the system need to do to help us do this better? Just to finish, a light question to finish, I feel, Rowena.
Yeah, I think the system needs to help give information to individual teachers as much as possible, because culturally responsive pedagogy requires us to develop relationship with individual pupils and to know the community and the pupils and that they come from. Individual teachers cannot do that, particularly secondary teachers. Where are they going to get the time to do this? So the system needs to help provide that kind of information. But also then that will help the teacher understand what is it that might impact on their teaching. So for example, if you know a cohort of students, pupils that you're teaching have a great interest in hip hop music, you might think, how can you use this as part of your teaching? And just to finish, because I know it's late in the day, a friend of mine, Sheila Lang, who was a head teacher at Forth View Primary in Edinburgh, wanted to actually open up issues of diversity to her non-diverse pupil group, I have to say, so not racially diverse, okay? And so what she did was she taught them about Aung San Suu Kyi in terms of Burma. And the reason she did was she brought out themes like house arrest, losing parents, not having a home, because she knew that the majority of her pupils in her school, there were pupils there whose parents were in prison, or they didn't have a parent, or they were in looked after care. And so she bridged actually the culturally relevant issues for her pupils with international issues, and the pupils are very engaged. And that for me is an example of how you can knit those issues together. So I know it's very late, there's lots of info on the websites actually, but people require time to go and look for these things. So hopefully that goes some way to answering your question.
Thank you, Rowena. Thanks everybody, and I'm afraid I'm going to have to wind it up now, even though, as always, there is masses left for us to unpack with all of the conversations that we've had. A very big special thank you to Rowena, to Lindsay and Annette, to Alan and to Kat. We really do deeply appreciate your time. The next roundtable is planned for the 15th of November, which sounds like it might be a long time away, but it'll be here before we know it, after Bonfire Night. And put that in your diaries now, because we would love to have you back. We're busy trying to get a really interesting and inspiring programme for you for a similar format for then. We would also like you to look out for an invitation that will be coming out to primary head teachers we're looking for primary head teachers to be inspired and through bravery and courageousness to share their groundbreaking work, because what I have learned about, and I said this to the group when we were in our secret panel chat, I sometimes think when we approach people to take part in these things, everyone has been incredibly generous with their time, but usually says, I don't really even know if my thing is that special enough to talk about. And it is. It is. You can tell that from tonight, can't you? And the kinds of comments and the conversation that you have had in groups. So people who are primary head teachers, you have things you need to share and we would really like to hear them. So look out for an invitation for that. So to finish, provocations that our friends have made tonight and will make in the future really underpin the complexity of our system, and that's what we need to get starting embracing. So hopefully this chat and these chats that we can create go some way to do that. It's a time of change for us in education again, I think it probably always will be, and teacher voice has got a very central role to play in that, and a critically informed teacher voice, and that's the real emphasis of that work, is about exploring the ethics that underpin all of that. So a huge thanks for taking part. Put the 15th of November in your diary, and all the best for the summer when it gets here, which if you're for us, it's something like 16 or 17 sleeps. If you're Kat and you're in Wales, it's a lot longer than that, so she's sad about that. So have a great summer when it comes, and we really do appreciate your interest in the work that we're doing together. Thanks so much.